So let's talk a little bit about the pieces of information we need. Now, earlier, many videos back, I said that we need some kind of minimum data set. And that minimum data set really is up to the company to decide how much data they want to qualify somebody as a lead. Now, I tend to favor requiring less information that's necessary information as opposed to superfluous information that may be less necessary. So I'm going to answer a question in this segment about whether or not to ask certain questions that I think are actually probably not that useful to ask. So the first thing you obviously need is you need to know the person's name. Once you know their name, then you're able to start engaging with them as a real person. Again, like I said before, you have given them your name already, so they're more likely to give you their name. You want to take their name and ideally record how they pronounce it and how they spell it, and also how they like to be addressed. Some people want to be addressed as Mr. Solar. Some people prefer to be addressed as Rod. Regardless of what they like, just make sure that you get an understanding of what that sounds like. You might even ask, is it okay to call you Rod? Is it okay? And if they say yes, that's fine. If they're not happy with it, they'll say, no, it's okay, just call me Mr. Solar. Most people today are happy to be called by their first names. It depends, of course, what kind of market you're dealing with. An older generation will perhaps not like that so much. People from different countries might have different cultural norms that they wish to be respected. On that note, people will also have names that are sometimes difficult to pronounce. Avoid the temptation to just simply gloss over that and fill in the name that you think it sounded like. You really need to get that spelling right. And the reason for that is because you might send that person email, you might send that person post in the future. The worst thing is getting a piece of correspondence from a clinic that doesn't even know how to spell your name. Customers imagine that if the clinic can't spell your name right, then how are they going to get the more complicated things right? So it's absolutely essential to spend the moment, even though you might think, oh, this is taking a lot of time. Even if you don't quite understand the name, get them to spell it out, even if it takes time. Make sure you're in control. Don't allow somebody to just simply say, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters. Their name is one of the most important things to them. You have to get it right. The other thing, too, is that if they ever call again, you need to know who it is that you're talking about. You need to be able to look that person up by name. So the name is the first thing. First name, second name, that's great. The more you get there, the better. The contact number is second. You want to probably get at the number that is easiest to reach them on. It can be their mobile, it can be their work, it can be their home. I would ask, first of all, can I have your name, please? I'd record that information. And then I'd say, can I have the number that's easiest to reach you at? And then they would provide me with that number. I don't really care if it's the mobile or if it's home or if it's business. To me, it's whatever number is easiest to reach them at. Sometimes people also don't want to be called at work, and sometimes people would prefer not to be called at home. So, it's important to understand what their preferences are and not always go for the only one type of number. And certainly there's no need for more than one. If you are in the habit of sending out emails to people because you've got them on some kind of follow-up sequence, or you tend to always confirm calls with emails, then ask for the email. If, however, you're not planning to use that email for any purpose, don't bother. I want you to think about this like a form on a website. You want to ask the fewest things possible in order to get them to the next step. You don't want to give them a questionnaire at the beginning because that just delays things in order to move to the next step. Now, some people might even think, well, perhaps I need to ask their address now. Well, I don't think you do. I think asking for postal address at this time is completely superfluous. Unless you intend to simply send them a brochure, which we all know will never sell anybody, there's no point in getting their postal address at this stage. Get it at the end when you've booked an appointment with them. That's when you need the postal address, if that's important to you. The other thing, too, is date of birth. Leave that for later. There's absolutely no need to get date of birth at this stage, unless, of course, it matters for what type of procedure you might be recommending. At this stage, we're not talking about that yet, so leave date of birth off the table. The third thing you do want to get is the inquiry source. And what I mean by that is, how did you hear about us? Okay, that's the question that I might ask. So tell me, how did you hear about us? And they might say, well, it was the internet or your website or Google. Those three things are basically the same. You write that down in your database. They might say it was an advertisement. If you do radio, they might say that. If you were on TV, they might say that. So whatever it is that you do, you want to get an understanding of what their inquiry source is. Why do you want this? Well, clearly, you want to have people calling your practice that are most likely to convert. And so if marketing people can track where the inquiry sources are coming from and compare that information to the people who call, and not only just call, but also book appointments and potentially book procedures, then more marketing investment can be focused on the areas that convert the best, as opposed to wasting money on the areas that don't produce any results. And that's why it's really important for you to ask about that inquiry source in order to help the whole machine work better.